The Bookshop at the Edge of Night. Part 1. It began with footsteps, soft ones, barely heard against the cobblestone street, where the fog lay thick and the gaslights flickered with tired breath. The hour was far past midnight, too late for cafes, too early for milkmen, and yet a figure moved steadily through the mist. She wore a coat the color of faded ink, buttoned high at the collar, and a scarf wrapped loosely around her throat. Her pace was not hurried, nor hesitant. It was the pace of someone who had walked this way before, though perhaps long ago. In her hand, she carried nothing, but in her eyes, there was something heavy, tiredness, maybe, or waiting. The street curved slightly where the old town gave way to silence. There, hidden between a stone archway and an ivy-covered wall, stood the bookshop. There was no name on the door, no lights in the windows, and yet it was open. She stepped inside without knocking. The air inside was warm. It smelled of parchment, cedarwood, and a faint trace of rose. The wooden floorboards creaked softly underfoot. The shelves stretched high, impossibly high, vanishing into shadows above. Books rested everywhere, in careful stacks on deep windowsills, tucked behind glowing lanterns that floated gently without flame. Behind the counter sat a figure, an old man, wrapped in a thick wool sweater, his eyes half closed as though listening to a story only he could hear. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. She gave him a small nod, and he returned it. Nothing more. Then she wandered deeper into the shop. There was no map to the place, no logic to how the shelves turned or where the rooms began or ended. One moment, she passed a row of books with gilded spines and sea blue covers. The next, she stepped into a corridor of journals so weathered, the ink had become whispers. Everywhere, the air hummed gently, like a lullaby too quiet to hear fully. She paused near a shelf of leather-bound volumes, her hand hovering over one with a midnight-colored cover and no title. Something about it called to her, not urgently, not even clearly, just a soft knowing. She pulled it down. The book was heavier than expected. When she opened the first page, there was no dedication, no table of contents, only words, flowing, slow, steady. And as she read, the world around her began to soften. Outside, the fog thickened. Inside, the bookshop quieted further. She sat in a deep armchair tucked beside a small window, though the glass revealed nothing but shadows. The chair welcomed her like an old friend. The book rested open in her lap, and slowly, word by word, page by page, her breathing slowed. The story inside the book wasn't grand. It had no plot, no hero, no ending. It was a walk through a forest at dusk, a memory of hands held, the feeling of rain on a window when you're safe indoors. It was exactly what she needed. The book did not rush her. It breathed with her. Each page unfolded like a sigh, carrying soft scenes that lingered rather than moved. A lake at dawn, mist curling above still water. A small lamp left burning in a windowsill. The warmth of wool socks on cold wooden floors. She wasn't reading anymore, not exactly. She was remembering, though she couldn't say what. The words didn't tell her what to feel. They simply opened small doors, one at a time, and waited patiently on the other side. Occasionally, she would glance up from the page and find that the room had changed slightly. A chair that wasn't there before now sat across from her, empty. The lantern by her elbow glowed a little softer. The walls seemed farther away. Time in this place didn't behave as it did elsewhere. She turned another page. The night does not ask for answers, the book read. It only offers stillness, and in stillness, we remember how to rest. She let her eyes close for a moment. When she opened them again, the shop was darker, quieter somehow. The old man behind the counter had vanished, or perhaps he was never really behind it. The shelves now leaned slightly inward, as if drawing closer. The ceiling, once impossibly high, seemed to have melted into a low canopy of shadow and lamp glow. But she wasn't afraid. Instead, she felt something rare, the sense that nothing more was required of her.
No decisions.
No questions.
No Jerry.
She was simply here, and the book was still open in her lap. At some point, She realized her eyes were reading without meaning to. The pages turned not with her fingers, but with her breath. The story had shifted. Now it told of a room much like this one, but quieter still. A single candle burned low. Outside, rain tapped gently against the glass. There was a blanket draped across the arm of a chair, and a teacup steaming softly on the table. She could almost smell it, honey and chamomile. The book had become a mirror, or a promise, or a place she had been, once, in a dream she had never fully left. A soft sound stirred the air, not footsteps, but the settling of wood. A shelf giving a gentle creak, as though exhaling. Somewhere deep within the shop, a bell rang. Not sharp, but distant and low, like the memory of a bell. She closed the book, not because the story had ended, but because she didn't need to read it anymore. It had done its work. She stood slowly, carrying the book back toward the front desk. The chair was still empty. A note rested on the counter now, though she hadn't seen it placed there. It read, in simple handwriting, "Take it with you. The night is long, but it will carry you gently." She looked toward the door. The shop didn't ask for payment. Never had. She pressed the book to her chest and stepped back out into the fog. The door closed behind her with no sound at all. Outside, the street looked different than before. The fog had thinned just slightly, and the lamps flickered a bit brighter. The world was hushed, but not asleep, more like it was listening. She stepped lightly onto the cobblestones, her boots making soft taps as she walked, the book tucked under one arm like something precious. She didn't look back at the shop. Somehow, she knew it would be gone. Not vanished exactly, just no longer there to be found unless it wanted to be. The town was quiet, window shutters drawn. No cars, no footsteps. Only the slow rustle of trees overhead and the gentle sigh of wind. She wandered, but not aimlessly. Her feet moved with a quiet confidence, guided more by instinct than direction. Past the old fountain, across the footbridge where vines hung low over the railing, through the narrow alley that smelled faintly of old stone and lilac. The book seemed to grow warmer in her arms. Eventually, she came to a door. It was not a place she recognized, not fully, but it felt familiar, as though she had passed it once, long ago, in a dream that had faded upon waking. The door was painted pale blue, its surface slightly chipped from time and weather. A small lantern flickered beside it. The window above the door was fogged, but faint light glowed within. She stood there for a moment, listening. Inside, there was no music. No voices. Just silence, and the steady rhythm of something alive and breathing. Peaceful, present. She opened the door. The room inside was small, but welcoming. A low fire burned in the hearth, its light dancing gently across wooden walls and a worn rug. A kettle rested on the stove. A single chair sat near the window, with a folded blanket placed across its back. Everything was quiet, yet held a kind of memory, as though someone had just left or was about to return. She stepped in and closed the door softly behind her. No one greeted her, but it didn't feel strange. The space was meant to be occupied, even if only for a little while. A place to land, to be still, to breathe. She walked to the armchair and sat, the book resting in her lap once again. For a moment, she simply listened to the soft pop of the firewood, the low hum of wind outside, and the deeper silence that rested in the corners of the room like a cat curled in sleep. Then she opened the book again. This time, the pages were different. They didn't speak in words. They showed images, soft, flickering scenes that drifted slowly across her mind. A path through an orchard at sunset. A stone bench beneath ivy. Hands pouring tea into a chipped cup. A lantern swinging gently on a hook, its light golden and kind. She leaned back, her head resting against the chair. The story unfolded around her, not demanding to be understood, only witnessed. A figure walking through falling leaves. A lake with no name. A house made of glass and wood and memory. A cat sleeping on a windowsill. A whisper in the wind that said, "You are safe now. You are safe." Her eyelids grew heavy, not from exhaustion, but from release. Her shoulders, so long held tight, slowly dropped. Her breathing evened. The world faded, but it did not disappear. It simply softened, edges rounding out, colors growing warmer, the air turning still. She didn't know when the book slipped from her hands, or when her thoughts stopped forming sentences. Only that she was floating, weightless, gently held by something older than sleep itself. Outside, the wind shifted once more. The bookshop remained unseen. The lantern at the blue door flickered once, then glowed steady. And within the quiet room, a woman rested, safe, silent, and utterly at peace. The room held her, not just the body that now slept in the armchair by the fire, but something deeper, something the world so often forgot to carry. The weight of the heart. The room understood. It did not ask questions, did not press or prod. It only offered what she hadn't realized she needed. Silence, stillness, time. And in that time, she dreamed, not in flashes or fractured symbols, but in long, unfolding moments, like mist curling over water, like pages turning by themselves. In the dream, she was walking again, not in the town, not in the room, somewhere older. The air was golden, like late afternoon in early autumn. The path beneath her feet was soft, covered in moss and fallen leaves. Around her, trees arched overhead, not towering but protective, their trunks wide and warm with age. She walked with no destination, but she felt as if she had walked this way before. Birdsong drifted through the branches, faint, distant, familiar. A stream whispered nearby, trickling over stones as smooth as memory. The light fell in long, slanting beams, like something sacred. Ahead, the forest opened to a small clearing. In the center stood a table, wooden, weathered, empty. She stepped closer, and as she did, books began to appear, gently, as though placed there by the wind itself. One by one, they settled across the table. Their covers were soft with time.
No titles, no markings.
She reached for one the same way she had in the shop. And once again, the book opened easily in her hands. This book, though, held no written words, only feelings. She did not read it. She remembered it. The smell of the sea on a childhood trip. The quiet click of a door closing behind someone who would never return. A song hummed to her when she was too small to understand its meaning. The warmth of a dog curled at her feet. The sound of her name said gently by someone who once meant everything. As each memory stirred, she did not weep. She only breathed deeper, as if each recollection gave her back a piece of herself she hadn't known was missing. She closed the book, not from pain but peace. Another book waited beside it, then another. And so, in the quiet of the clearing, she read, and remembered, and rested. At some point, a figure approached. Not sudden, not frightening, just there. The figure did not speak. They wore a long coat, much like hers. Their face was not clear, not hidden, just softened, like something seen just after waking. They placed a single cup of tea on the table, nodded once, and walked away without sound. She wrapped her hands around the warmth of the cup. It smelled like chamomile and honey, and something else. A note of something she couldn't name, but that made her heart ache in the softest, most bearable way. She sipped, and the forest deepened around her, a cocoon of trees and fading light. Somewhere between waking and sleep, she felt the armchair again. The fire's warmth against her legs, the subtle crackle of embers, the book resting on her chest. She did not wake, not fully. She simply floated between worlds, between thoughts, between breaths. The room understood, and the night held her gently. Outside, dawn was still far off. The street was still empty. The door to the bookshop remained invisible to anyone who wasn't meant to find it. But inside that room, a soul rested. And the story was still being told, not loudly, not quickly, but softly, page by page, heart by heart. The world outside remained hushed, suspended in the velvet hours just before dawn, the time when even the birds hold their breath. Inside the small room, the fire had softened to a faint glow. Shadows draped across the floor like silk, and she still rested in the armchair, unmoving but not unconscious. wrapped in a sleep that was deeper than dreams, but lighter than forgetting. The book on her lap remained open. The pages didn't turn, yet the story continued. It always did. Somewhere in the stillness, she heard a sound. Not near, not loud, but clear. The soft creak of a floorboard. She did not wake. She simply became aware. A warmth moved through the room, like someone walking slowly past her, not disturbing a single thing, yet leaving behind a presence as real as breath. The air shifted. A chair across from her, once empty, now held someone. Not the old man from the shop, not the quiet figure from the clearing. Someone else. Their face was calm, their hands folded. They didn't speak. They simply sat across from her, watching, not with urgency, but with patience, with knowing. And in that quiet moment, she understood something without needing words. She was not alone in her rest, not in this chair, not in her grief, not in her waiting. Others had come before her, others would follow, and somehow that was enough. Time passed without ticking. Light began to slip through the edges of the shuttered window, slow and soft, like cream poured into tea. She stirred. Her eyes opened, not suddenly, but like petals unfolding. The room hadn't changed. The fire was lower. The air was cooler. The figure in the chair was gone. But something lingered. She sat for a moment, her hands resting on the book. She looked down. The page was blank. Not with emptiness, but invitation. It was hers to write now. She stood slowly. Her limbs carried the weightlessness of deep rest. Her thoughts were clear, but quiet. The bookshop no longer felt mysterious. It felt like a part of her, like something she had always known but forgotten how to find. She didn't look for the teacup. She didn't wonder who had been with her. She only moved with stillness in her chest and warmth in her fingertips. At the door, she paused. The street outside was soft with morning fog, silver and pale. The sun had not yet risen, but the promise of light was tucked just beneath the horizon. She stepped outside. Behind her, the door closed with a hush.
No latch clicked.
No lock turned. It simply became part of the wall again, unfindable, unreadable, invisible to the day. She walked, not quickly, not lost, just forward. The book still rested in her arms. Far behind her now, the bookshop at the edge of night settled back into its timeless hush. The lantern above the door flickered once, then went out. Inside, the chair was empty again. The fire waited quietly, and somewhere deep within the shelves, the next book stirred. Still closed, still quiet, but ready for whoever might need it next. Long after the woman with the ink-colored coat had vanished into the soft morning fog, the bookshop rested in silence once more. It did not creak. It did not breathe, but it waited. Its windows, which reflected nothing of the outside world, were now clouded over with a soft glow, as if touched by a memory of candlelight. Inside, the shelves stood tall and still and full not only with books, but with time itself. Time folded into pages, into rooms that drifted quietly behind curtains, into stories that had never been spoken aloud. And somewhere in that hush, behind the shelves, or perhaps beneath them, a figure stirred. The shopkeeper, not old, not young, not male, not female, just there. Presence more than a person. A keeper not of books, but of moments, of pauses, of silence. The shopkeeper moved slowly through the aisles, brushing dust from spines that hadn't been opened in years, but had never been forgotten. They straightened the lanterns, which flickered softly though no flame was lit. They ran a hand along the wooden banister of the staircase that led nowhere visible. And then, as if sensing a distant thread tugged tight, they stopped. The shopkeeper turned toward the door, still closed, still hidden behind ivy and shadow, and tilted their heads slightly. A visitor was coming. Far across the city, beneath the first light of evening, another soul wandered. This one moved differently, shoulders tight, steps quick, eyes scanning the edges of buildings as though trying to see something that wasn't quite there. He was tired, though he wouldn't have admitted it. Not in the way people meant when they said they were tired of work or noise or others, He was tired in a way that lived in the bones, in the silence between his thoughts, in the hollow ache behind his ribs when the world got too loud. And yet he walked, street after street, turning not by choice but by pull, a quiet, invisible tug guiding his steps down narrower lanes, past older brick walls, past time-worn street lamps that buzzed faintly in the dusk, until he came to a street he didn't recognize. And at the end of that street, a door. It looked like nothing. Faded blue paint, a cracked step, no sign,
No windows.
but a single lantern hung above the door, and in the last breath before nightfall, it flickered once. And that was enough. He stepped closer, placed a hand on the worn brass knob, and entered. The air inside was cool this time, like the first breeze of autumn in an old library. Not cold, but sobering, calming, the scent of aged paper, dried herbs, and something darker, perhaps ink, perhaps memory, wrapped around him like a shawl. The light inside was low, not dim, gentle. He took a breath and exhaled slowly. For the first time in what felt like years, his shoulders dropped. The shopkeeper stood at the far end of the room, back turned, as if considering a particularly stubborn book on the shelf. They didn't speak. They never did. But the man nodded anyway, as if in greeting, as if in recognition. Then he began to walk, slowly, uncertainly at first, then with a kind of reverence, as the silence of the bookshop pulled the tension from his body one thread at a time. He passed rows of books with names he didn't recognize, written in languages he couldn't read, yet somehow understood. He ran his fingers along a shelf of blank spines that still radiated stories. He paused before a table where a single book sat waiting, its cover a soft, worn gray, its edges frayed as though it had been held by many hands. He reached for it. Somewhere, the fire lit itself. Somewhere, a chair sighed quietly as if remembering comfort. Somewhere, a story began again. Slowly, softly, with no beginning and no rush to end. And outside, the lantern above the door glowed steady in the dark. Another soul had entered, and the night had made room. He settled into an armchair near the hearth, the weight of the day slowly unraveling from his body. The gray book rested lightly on his knees, its cover worn but soft, as if it had absorbed the hands of countless readers before him. He opened the book. At first, there were no words, only the faint scent of rain on stone and the cool hush of evening mist. Slowly, sentences began to appear on the pages, as though written by an invisible hand, each one flowing like a slow river, carrying him deeper into the quiet. This is a place where the heart can pause, where the mind can drift without destination, and where sleep is not an escape but a welcome. His eyes traced the gentle script. The room around him seemed to fade, replaced by the soft glow of twilight filtering through ancient trees. A path wound beneath the branches, leading somewhere both unknown and familiar. He felt the steady pulse of the words in his chest, calming, steadying, like a heartbeat slowing to match the rhythm of the story. The story was not about grand adventures or sudden revelations. It was about small things, the way light falls through a window in the early morning, the quiet sound of pages turning in a book left open, the gentle brush of a breeze against skin after a long winter, the delicate balance of holding on and letting go. He read on, the words wrapping around him like a soft blanket, pulling him toward rest. Minutes stretched into hours, or maybe only moments, for time had lost meaning here. He leaned back, the book still open, his eyes heavy but unresisting. The firelight flickered, casting dancing shadows across the shelves. Outside, the lantern's glow softened, as if bowing to the deep peace inside. And in the stillness, he felt a shift. Not a change in the room, but within himself. The tightness in his chest eased. The restless clamor of his thoughts quieted. The endless noise of the world faded into a distant hum. He was here, present, peace. The bookshop had done what it was meant to do. It had welcomed another traveler, offered a sanctuary, whispered a story slow enough to cradle a weary soul. He closed the book gently, and for the first time in a long time, he felt ready to sleep. He sat still, the soft leather of the armchair molding gently to his form as if welcoming him home. Outside the quiet windows, the world was lost to night, but inside, time stretched and folded like the pages of the book resting in his hands. His fingers traced the worn edges of the cover, feeling the faint impressions left by readers long gone. Each one a whisper, a breath, a memory folded into the fibers. The words inside no longer needed reading. They had already settled deep within him, filling the spaces that had long felt empty. He closed his eyes. Behind those lids, the scenes unfolded like a slow dance. A field at dusk, golden with fading light and dotted with wildflowers nodding gently in a breeze too soft to feel. A worn path winding beneath towering oaks whose leaves shimmered with the last hints of autumn fire. A cottage with smoke curling from its chimney, nestled among hills wrapped in lavender mist. Voices came soft, distant, like lullabies hummed through time. They spoke of rest, of healing, of the peace found in surrendering to the night's embrace. His breath deepened, each inhale a quiet gathering, each exhale a slow release. He was not chasing dreams or fleeing the day. He was simply allowing the night to carry him. The armchair seemed to hold him with a tender firmness, cradling both body and spirit. The bookshop around him softened, its walls becoming less walls and more a gentle shelter, woven from stories and silence. The fire's glow dimmed, casting long, tender shadows that danced without urgency. In this quiet place between waking and sleeping, he felt time dissolve. No past, no future, only the present moment. A fragile, precious thread stretched between breath and rest. His thoughts slowed, drifting like leaves on a slow stream. Images, soft and hazy, passed through his mind. A child's laughter, a warm hand in his, a sky full of stars mirrored in calm water. He welcomed each one, letting them come and go without grasping. The book slipped from his hands. His head tipped gently back against the chair. Eyelids fluttered closed, and the world outside the bookshop melted away. Inside the quiet sanctuary, the fire burned low. The lantern above the door flickered softly, as if breathing in time with the slow, steady pulse of sleep. The shopkeeper moved unseen, tending the space with careful hands, readying it for the next soul who might wander through its doors. Because this place was never just about stories. It was about the spaces between stories, the silent moments, the gentle pauses, the deep, unspoken kindness that lets us rest. And so the night passed, slowly, softly, with the quiet promise of morning yet far away. As the visitor drifted deeper into sleep, the bookshop seemed to breathe along with him. The soft rustle of pages, the faint crackle of embers, and the gentle hum of the lantern's glow wove together into a quiet symphony of rest. The walls, lined with books worn by time and touch, held the whispers of countless stories, each one a thread in the tapestry of dreams that filled the air. Outside, the world remained cloaked in darkness, but inside, the night shimmered with gentle light and the quiet promise of peace. In the stillness, the visitor's dreams began to unfurl, not as fleeting images or sharp moments, but as long, flowing scenes that moved with the rhythm of a slow river. He found himself walking through a vast meadow, where the grass brushed softly against his fingertips and wildflowers nodded in the breeze. Above, the sky was a deep indigo, studded with stars that twinkled like distant lanterns. A gentle wind carried the scent of pine and earth, grounding him in the quiet beauty of the moment. Ahead, a path appeared, softly lit by fireflies that drifted like tiny lanterns, guiding him forward. He followed, feeling neither haste nor hesitation, simply moving with the flow of the dream. The path wound through a forest where ancient trees stood tall and silent, their leaves whispering secrets only the night could hold. At times, the light of the moon filtered through the canopy, casting silver patterns on the forest floor. Along the way, he came upon a small stream, its water clear and cool. Kneeling by the edge, he dipped his hands into the gentle current and felt a wave of calm wash over him. The sound of the water mingled with a distant song, a melody so soft and tender that it felt like a lullaby from another world. He closed his eyes, letting the music carry him deeper into the quiet. As he rose to continue, the forest opened into a clearing bathed in moonlight. In the center stood a single, ancient willow tree, its branches sweeping low and wide, creating a sanctuary beneath its boughs. He stepped beneath the tree, feeling the soft earth beneath his feet and the gentle sway of leaves above. The willow seemed to welcome him, its presence both comforting and wise. Here, time seemed to pause. He sat beneath the tree's protective branches and felt a deep stillness settle within him. The worries and burdens he had carried began to dissolve, carried away on the night breeze. In this place, he was free to rest, to breathe, to simply be. Back in the bookshop, the fire burned low, casting flickering shadows that danced quietly on the walls. The shopkeeper moved silently among the shelves, tending to the space with care and reverence. They paused near the hearth, their eyes reflecting the gentle glow of the embers. Though they said nothing, their presence was a quiet reminder that in this place, all who came were safe, all who sought rest were welcomed, and all who wandered lost could find their way home. And so, wrapped in the soft embrace of night and story, the visitors slept. The bookshop waited patiently for the next soul drawn to its quiet doors, because some places exist not to be seen or heard, but to be felt, deep in the heart, where stories and sleep intertwine. The visitor remained beneath the willow's quiet shelter, the moonlight weaving soft patterns through the leaves above. The cool earth beneath him seemed to cradle his every breath, as if the very ground remembered his presence and welcomed him home. Around him, the night hummed softly, a song without words, a melody made of silence and starlight. Somewhere far away, an owl called once, then drifted into quiet. Time here was fluid, neither measured nor demanded. It simply existed as a gentle current, carrying him onward without rush or resistance. He closed his eyes beneath the willow, feeling the steady rhythm of his heart slow to match the pulse of the night. Thoughts that had crowded his mind like tangled branches now softened, loosening their grip like leaves falling softly to the ground. In this sacred stillness, he remembered something precious, something buried beneath the noise and hurry of everyday life. The simple act of resting, not escaping, but returning to a place where he could be whole. As he sat there, a soft breeze stirred the branches, and a single leaf drifted down, landing lightly on his outstretched hand. It was golden and fragile, edged with the quiet glow of twilight. He held it gently, feeling its weight, a symbol of change, of letting go. The leaf seemed to whisper, though no sound came, "You are here. You are safe. You are enough." He breathed deeply, letting those words settle inside. Back in the bookshop, the lantern above the door pulsed softly, a heartbeat in the quiet darkness. The shelves, heavy with stories and silence, held their secrets close but open. The shopkeeper lingered near the hearth, eyes closed for a moment, sensing the flow of another soul finding peace. No words were spoken, but a quiet understanding passed between the keeper and the night itself. This place was a haven for all who wandered weary, all who sought the gentle embrace of rest. Outside, the sky began to lighten, soft hues of lavender and pale gold brushing the horizon. The visitor remained beneath the willow a while longer, savoring the quiet promise of dawn. Slowly, he rose, feeling a new lightness within him, a readiness to move forward, carried by the calm he had found. With one last look at the moonlit clearing, he turned back toward the path, stepping gently through the forest that now felt like home. The bookshop waited quietly for the next night, the next visitor, the next story. A place where time folded softly, where silence sang gently, and where sleep was not an end, but a beginning. The visitor's footsteps were light as he retraced the winding path through the forest. The early morning mist curled softly around tree trunks, and the faint scent of damp earth rose to meet him. Each breath he took was calm, steady, filled with the lingering peace of the willow's embrace. The forest seemed to part for him, as though recognizing a traveler who had finally found his way. Leaves whispered secrets overhead, and somewhere nearby, a gentle brook sang its steady song. He did not hurry. There was no need. The world around him moved with the slow grace of dawn. As he emerged from the trees, the landscape shifted. Rolling hills stretched out beneath a sky blushing with the first light of morning. Soft grasses swayed gently in the breeze, their tips kissed by dew. The air was cool but comforting, a quiet promise of renewal. He paused for a moment on a rise and looked back toward the forest's edge. The trees stood still, sentinel and sanctuary, holding the night's secrets close. A sense of gratitude welled within him, quiet and profound. Beyond the hills, the town stirred softly. Smoke curled lazily from chimneys, and faint lights flickered behind curtained windows. The bookshop, hidden once again, waited silently. Its doors closed but not locked, ready for the next soul drawn to its gentle light. He felt the weight of the book still in his hands, a talisman of the night's journey, worn and warm with meaning. It was no longer just a book. It was a companion, a map, a quiet reminder that rest was always within reach. With the sun rising higher, he turned toward home, not hurried but certain. The world felt different now, softer, more forgiving. He carried within him the stillness of the bookshop, the whisper of the willow, and the slow unfolding of a story that had no end, only moments of peace, one after another. And somewhere far away, beneath the quiet glow of street lamps that had long since dimmed, the bookshop waited for the next visitor, for the next story, for the next gentle passage into night. As the visitor walked away from the town and the soft glow of dawn stretched across the sky, the bookshop remained, a sanctuary hidden from ordinary eyes. Its walls breathed stories, waiting patiently for the next soul seeking refuge from the world's clamor. Not long after, a different figure approached. This one moved with a hesitance that spoke of deep weariness, a young woman whose steps faltered under the weight of unspoken burdens. Her eyes searched the twilight shadows, seeking a place to rest. She paused before a faded blue door, the lantern above flickering softly, inviting her in. Without hesitation, she stepped inside. The air inside was cool but comforting, filled with the scent of aged paper and soft wood. Shelves stretched endlessly, harboring tales both told and untold. The fire flickered low, casting tender shadows. The shopkeeper observed from afar, silent as always, a gentle presence that welcomed without question. The woman moved slowly through the aisles, her fingers trailing along book spines, her breath steadying with each step. A particular volume caught her eye, bound in soft gray leather, edges worn. She lifted it gently, feeling an unexpected warmth. Opening the book, she found no words, only spaces inviting her own story to unfold. As she settled into an armchair near the fire, the shop seemed to transform. The walls softened, the light dimmed to a soothing glow, and the room wrapped around her like a gentle embrace. Outside, the night deepened, the lanterns flicker steady and sure. Within the pages of the empty book, her thoughts began to settle. Memories surfaced, moments of quiet joy, fragments of laughter, the touch of a hand long missed. Slowly, she allowed herself to breathe these in, releasing the heaviness she had carried. The bookshop held her gently, cradling her in its timeless quiet. The night stretched on, a soft, unbroken thread of peace and rest. And somewhere, waiting silently, the bookshop prepared for the next visitor drawn by its quiet light. A haven where stories and souls entwined in the stillness of the night. The woman settled deeper into the armchair, the soft gray book resting on her lap like a fragile treasure. The fire's glow flickered softly, painting golden hues on the worn wooden floor and casting long, tender shadows against the walls lined with books. She opened the book slowly, expecting words to appear, but instead found blank pages inviting her to fill them, to write her own story, or perhaps simply to let the pages hold her silence. As she gazed at the empty pages, memories began to drift unbidden to the surface, images of gentle afternoons, the warmth of sunlight on her skin, the quiet laughter shared with someone now distant. A sigh escaped her lips, releasing the tension she hadn't realized she'd held. The room seemed to breathe with her, the silence not empty but alive, filled with understanding and comfort. Outside, The lantern's light pulsed softly, like a heartbeat in the night. Inside, the shopkeeper watched quietly from a shadowed corner, their presence steady and reassuring, a guardian of the space between wakefulness and rest. No words passed between them, yet in that unspoken space, the woman felt seen, welcomed, and safe. The bookshop shifted subtly around her, the shelves leaning in, the fire's warmth deepening, the air thick with the scent of worn pages and quiet hope. She closed her eyes, allowing the stillness to wash over her, her breath slowing as the night carried her gently toward peace. In this sanctuary, time was fluid, moments stretching and folding into one another like the soft pages of the book she held. She was neither hurried nor held back, simply present in the quiet now. The bookshop whispered its eternal promise. Here you may rest. Here you are home. And so the night deepened, holding her in its gentle fold, while outside, the lantern above the blue door glowed steady, waiting for the next soul to find refuge in the quiet magic of the bookshop at the edge of night. As the night wove on, the woman's breath grew slow and even, her eyelids heavy but unresisting. The soft gray book lay open on her lap, its blank pages still inviting yet somehow already filled with the weight of her presence. Her thoughts drifted like leaves on a slow stream, unhurried, unburdened. She found herself walking again, but this time within the realm of the story itself, where the boundaries between reality and dream blurred softly like twilight. She wandered through a garden, lush and fragrant, where flowers bloomed beneath the silver light of the moon. Their petals shimmered softly, and the air was sweet with the scent of jasmine and wild mint. A gentle breeze stirred the branches overhead, carrying whispers of forgotten lullabies and the distant sound of laughter, warm, familiar, and comforting. In the garden's heart, a fountain trickled quietly, its water crystal clear and cool. She knelt beside it, cupping her hands to drink. The water tasted of peace and memory, refreshing and soothing. Nearby, a bench waited beneath an ancient oak tree, its gnarled branches stretching wide like open arms. She sat there, feeling the rough wood beneath her fingers and the steady heartbeat of the earth beneath her feet. Time slowed. The garden became a sanctuary where she could set down her worries and rest. Here, the shadows held no fear, only the soft comfort of the night's embrace. The stars above twinkled with quiet patience, watching over her as she breathed deeply, letting go. Back in the bookshop, the fire flickered low, its glow a gentle pulse in the quiet. The shopkeeper moved among the shelves, unseen but present, an eternal guardian of the stories and souls who found refuge here. No words were needed. The silence spoke volumes. Outside, the lantern above the door glowed steady, a beacon in the night's hush. The bookshop waited patiently for the next visitor, the next story, the next journey into rest. The garden around her seemed to breathe softly, its quiet beauty wrapping around her like a tender shawl. Moonlight filtered through the leaves, casting dappled shadows that danced slowly, like whispers of forgotten dreams. She closed her eyes, feeling the cool night air against her skin, and the steady rhythm of the earth beneath her. In that stillness, her heart began to ease, the weight of the world lifting gently from her shoulders. A soft melody drifted on the breeze, a song without words, carried from somewhere deep within the night. It was a lullaby, timeless and gentle, wrapping around her like a warm embrace. She hummed along softly, the sound barely more than a breath, and the garden seemed to lean closer, listening. Moments stretched and blurred, the boundary between waking and dreaming fading away. She found herself standing now beneath the oak's sprawling branches, reaching up to touch the rough bark. The tree seemed alive, steady, ancient, and full of quiet wisdom. She pressed her palm against it, feeling the slow pulse of life beneath the surface, a heartbeat shared between earth and sky. Somewhere, a single leaf drifted down, landing softly at her feet. She picked it up, turning it gently in her hand, a delicate reminder of change, of cycles, of the endless flow of time. The garden whispered again, and she understood. Here, in this quiet place between night and day, she was safe to let go. Back in the bookshop, the fire flickered softly, its glow warm and steady. The shopkeeper moved quietly among the shelves, their presence a calm anchor in the ever-turning tide of stories and souls. The lantern above the door pulsed gently, a heartbeat in the stillness. And outside, the world waited for the next visitor, the next story, the next gentle passage into rest. The woman lingered beneath the ancient oak, the cool night air wrapping around her like a gentle cloak. The garden hummed softly with life unseen, the stars above shimmering like distant lanterns guiding her way. She breathed deeply, feeling the peaceful stillness settle deep within her bones, as though the very earth beneath her was whispering lullabies meant just for her. Slowly, she turned and walked along a narrow path winding through the garden, each step light and unhurried. The scent of jasmine and earth mingled with the coolness of the night, soothing her restless spirit. The path led her toward a small wooden gate, weathered and worn yet sturdy, an entrance both ancient and inviting. With a gentle push, the gate opened, revealing a quiet clearing bathed in soft moonlight. In the center of the clearing stood a simple bench, its surface smooth from years of quiet contemplation. She approached and sat, feeling the coolness of the wood beneath her palms. Around her, the garden held its breath, waiting, watching, welcoming. She closed her eyes, letting the night's peace wash over her like a gentle tide, pulling away the worries she had carried for so long. Back in the bookshop, the fire's glow softened to embers, casting a warm, fading light across the shelves. The shopkeeper moved silently through the room, their presence a steady, comforting pulse within the quiet. They paused briefly by the lantern hanging over the door, offering a silent blessing to the night's unfolding stories. Outside, the world remained hushed, wrapped in the stillness between night and dawn. The lantern flickered softly, a beacon for those seeking solace and rest. The bookshop waited patiently, timeless and unwavering, ready to welcome the next weary soul in need of its gentle embrace. The woman remained seated on the worn wooden bench, her hands resting gently on her lap. The moonlight bathed her in silver, soft and unhurried, as if time itself had slowed to honor this quiet moment. Around her, the garden seemed to pulse with a gentle life, each leaf, each petal, each blade of grass swaying in a rhythm only the night could know. A soft breeze stirred, carrying the scent of lavender and pine, mingling with the faint aroma of old books still lingering from the shop behind her. She inhaled deeply, letting the fragrant night air fill her lungs, soothing the ache she had carried for so long. Her thoughts drifted, unshaped and fluid, like water flowing over smooth stones. Memories surfaced, some tender, some bittersweet, but none demanding, none harsh. They came as quiet visitors, pausing briefly before, floating away into the depths of her mind. She thought of laughter shared beneath summer skies, of warm hands held in times of uncertainty, of whispered promises made and sometimes broken. And yet, here in this garden of moonlight and shadow, those memories were not anchors, but threads woven into a tapestry of healing. As the night deepened, a faint melody began to thread through the air, a song carried on the breeze, soft and unspoken. It was neither distant nor near, but everywhere and nowhere, wrapping around her like a tender embrace. She hummed along, the sound barely audible, blending with the nocturnal chorus of crickets and rustling leaves. The song held no words, only feeling, a lullaby for the soul, an invitation to rest without fear or haste. She closed her eyes, surrendering to the night's gentle current. The coolness of the earth beneath the bench seeped into her skin, grounding her, anchoring her to the sanctuary between waking and dreaming. Time became a soft thread, weaving moments into one another without beginning or end. The garden held her safely, a quiet harbor from the storms of the day. Back in the bookshop, the fire's last embers glowed faintly, casting flickering light across shelves that stretched beyond sight. The shopkeeper moved silently, a shadow among shadows, tending the space with reverence. Though unseen, their presence was felt deeply, a steady heartbeat in the stillness, a guardian of stories and souls who sought refuge within these walls. The lantern above the door pulsed gently, its warm light beckoning the next traveler who might find their way here, drawn by the promise of peace. Outside, the horizon blushed with the first whispers of dawn, soft pinks and purples bleeding into the darkness. The world prepared to awaken, but here, in the bookshop and its moonlit garden, night held firm a little longer, cradling those who needed it most. The woman opened her eyes slowly, the night's embrace lingering in her gaze. She rose from the bench with a quiet grace, feeling the subtle strength of rest renewed. The garden's shadows receded softly as she turned toward the path leading back to the bookshop. The doorway between worlds, between stories, between silence and sleep. With steady steps, she walked through the quiet garden, the soft earth pressing gently beneath her feet. The book in her hand seemed to pulse with warmth, a talisman of the night's gentle magic. She reached the door of the bookshop, pausing to look back once more at the moonlit clearing. A small smile touched her lips, fragile but real. Then, she stepped inside. The door closed softly behind her, the lantern's glow steady and sure, and the bookshop waited. Inside, the air was thick with the familiar scent of aged paper and worn leather, mingled with the faint trace of lavender from the garden outside. The woman's footsteps were soft against the wooden floorboards, their polished surface catching the amber glow of the dying embers in the hearth. She moved slowly, deliberately, as if each step carried the weight of the night's revelations, yet also a newfound lightness. The shopkeeper appeared from the shadows, not as a figure to be feared, but as a gentle guardian. Their eyes met hers briefly, a silent acknowledgement passing between them, rich with understanding. Without words, the shopkeeper gestured toward a small table near the fire where a fresh book awaited. A blank slate, its cover soft and inviting, waiting to hold the next chapter of her story. She settled into the chair by the hearth, the warmth washing over her like a quiet wave. The book rested in her lap, its pages glowing faintly in the firelight, as if alive with possibility. With a slow breath, she opened the cover and began to write. Not with ink or pen, but with the quiet whispers of her heart. The soft memories gathered beneath the willow and the oak, the peaceful moments cradled in the garden's embrace. Words came easily now, sentences forming like gentle streams, flowing without rush or hesitation. Each phrase a small step toward healing, each paragraph a thread weaving her scattered thoughts into a tapestry of calm. The shopkeeper watched silently, their presence a steady beacon in the quiet room. Outside, the lantern above the door flickered softly, casting long shadows that stretched and folded across the worn floorboards. The bookshop pulsed with life, not the noisy clamor of the world, but the quiet heartbeat of stories unfolding in the stillness. As dawn's first light touched the sky beyond the shuttered windows, the woman closed the book gently, a peaceful smile touching her lips. For the first time in a long while, she felt whole. The shopkeeper nodded once, then retreated into the shadows, leaving the room bathed in the soft glow of morning's promise. The bookshop, eternal and patient, waited for the next soul to wander through its doors, for the next story to unfold, for the next quiet passage into night. Morning light seeped softly through the stained glass windows of the bookshop, painting the walls in muted colors, deep blues, soft ambers, and faded greens. The air held a peaceful stillness, as if the night's quiet magic lingered in every corner, reluctant to fully release its hold. The woman sat in her chair by the hearth, the book still resting on her lap. Its pages, once blank, now bore the delicate impressions of her thoughts, memories, and dreams, an intimate map of the night's journey. She reached out, tracing a fingertip over the words that seemed to shimmer faintly in the morning light. Each line a soft echo of the garden, the willow, the oak, and the gentle path that had led her here. The book felt warm beneath her touch, alive with the gentle power of stories held close to the heart. Around her, the bookshop stirred softly. Shelves shifted imperceptibly, rearranging themselves like the slow turning of a page, preparing for the next visitor who might seek refuge within its walls. The fire in the hearth had dwindled to glowing embers, but its warmth still filled the room with a comforting glow. The shopkeeper emerged from the shadows again, their presence calm and steady. They approached the woman quietly, offering a small cup filled with fragrant tea, a blend of chamomile and lavender, soothing and familiar. She accepted it with a grateful smile, the warmth of the cup a gentle comfort in her hands. They shared no words, but in that silence, a deep understanding passed between them. The bookshop was more than a place, it was a sanctuary, a living story woven from the threads of countless lives, each visitor leaving a mark like a fingerprint on its soul. The woman took a slow sip, feeling the calming herbs settle within her, grounding her further in the present moment. Outside, the world was waking, birds beginning their morning songs, light spilling over rooftops and streets. But inside, time moved differently. It stretched and curled, folding into itself like the pages of a well-loved book. Here, the noise of the outside faded to a distant murmur, replaced by a profound stillness that wrapped around her like a soft shawl. She rose from her chair slowly, the book still cradled in her arms. Each step toward the door was measured, deliberate, as though savoring the last moments in this quiet haven. At the threshold, she paused and glanced back at the shelves, rows upon rows of stories waiting patiently for the next soul to discover them. A quiet promise hung in the air, that no matter how heavy the day, the bookshop's doors would always be open to those who needed rest. Stepping outside, the woman inhaled deeply, the crisp morning air filling her lungs, fresh and invigorating. The lantern above the door flickered one last time before settling into a steady glow. Behind her, the blue door closed softly, but not firmly. The bookshop waited patiently, eternal and unwavering, and as the world turned toward a new day, the story whispered on, a gentle invitation to all who wander weary. Come, rest, and find peace within these quiet walls. As the woman stepped back into the waking world, the bookshop settled once more into its stillness, a timeless refuge awaiting the next seeker of solace. The shopkeeper moved silently through the dim aisles, their footsteps whispering on the polished wooden floor. They paused before a narrow staircase tucked behind a towering shelf, its steps winding upward into the unknown. With careful hands, the shopkeeper reached for an ancient key hanging from a leather cord around their neck. The metal was cool and worn, its intricate patterns telling stories older than memory. The key slid smoothly into the lock, and the door creaked open to reveal a small room bathed in soft, golden light, a private sanctuary nestled above the bookshop. Here, shelves held volumes bound in rich, dark leather, their titles etched in gilded script. The air was thick with the scent of parchment and candle wax. A single window framed a view of the night sky, stars glittering like scattered diamonds across the velvet darkness. The shopkeeper approached a low table at the center of the room, where an open ledger lay waiting. They dipped a quill into ink and began to write. The names of those who had found refuge in the bookshop during the night, their stories quietly recorded as if to honor the journey each soul had taken. The quill moved slowly, tracing gentle loops and flourishes, capturing not just names but the essence of healing and rest. The intangible threads woven between visitor and sanctuary. With each name, the shopkeeper's expression softened, a quiet gratitude glowing in their eyes. Below, the bookshop's lantern flickered in the growing dawn, casting long shadows that stretched and curled, mingling with the first light of morning. Outside, the world stirred, busy and loud. But here, within these walls and in the hidden room above, time flowed differently. It was a place untouched by hurry, where stories breathed deeply and peace settled like a soft snow. The shopkeeper closed the ledger carefully, the ink still drying on the page. They rose and moved to the window, gazing out at the horizon where night met day, the colors blending in a quiet promise of return. For as long as there were weary souls seeking shelter and stories to guide them, the bookshop at the edge of night would wait, an eternal harbor in the restless tide of time. The shopkeeper lingered by the window, the warm wood beneath their hands smooth from years of quiet repetition. Outside, the colors of dawn stretched slowly across the sky, soft rose, muted gold, pale blue, all blooming without fanfare, without urgency. They had seen this view 1,000 times, perhaps more, yet it never felt the same. The dawn always carried something different, a whisper, a signal, a feeling that somewhere in the world, Someone had begun to dream again. Below, the bookshop sat wrapped in silence, as if it too were catching its breath. The shelves had stopped shifting. The books had closed their covers like eyelids folding into slumber. Even the lantern by the door had stilled, its flame small but steady, a heartbeat in the quiet. The shopkeeper turned back from the window and made their way down the narrow staircase, each step creaking softly beneath their weight. Re-entering the main floor, they passed familiar corners, each one a chapter of the shop's long memory. There was the alcove where a boy had once fallen asleep over a book of fairy tales, his fingers still curled around the last page. The table by the west-facing window where an old woman had written letters she would never send, letting the sunlight warm her silence. The tall green chair, tucked half-forgotten near the poetry shelves, where a man had cried without shame as the words reminded him of someone he'd lost, and then, somehow, of what he still carried. Each visitor left something behind, though they took nothing with them. The shopkeeper knew this. They had tended these echoes for as long as they could remember, and in return, the bookshop gave back something precious. Stillness, safety, and the quiet courage to dream again. The shopkeeper lit a candle and placed it on the central table. Not for light, but for presence. A soft signal that the shop was, once more, ready to receive. Outside, the world fully awakened. Birds calling to each other, carts rolling over cobblestones, shutters opening with sleepy hands. But inside, the bookshop stood apart, untouched by haste. A faint rustle at the door drew the shopkeeper's gaze. There, on the edge of the threshold, stood a child. Small, uncertain, eyes wide not with fear, but with a wondering curiosity, as though she had found something she had been looking for without knowing what it was. The lantern above her flickered once, then steadied. The shopkeeper gave a gentle nod. The girl stepped inside, and just like that, a new story began. Quietly, exactly as it was meant to, the little girl stood just inside the doorway, her hands clasped before her, eyes wide as they roamed the shelves that stretched far above her head. She stepped forward slowly, drawn by something invisible yet unmistakable, like a melody remembered in a dream. The shopkeeper watched without speaking, allowing the space to meet her gently. She wandered past the shelves like someone moving through a forest, pausing here, tilting her head there, until at last, she stopped before a single slim book. It was bound in midnight blue, its spine bare of title, but it called to her all the same. She took it down and carried it to the small table where the candle flickered. Settling into a chair too large for her, she opened the book with care. There were no words at first, just soft colors on the page, shifting like clouds. Then, slowly, the pictures began to change. Shapes becoming places, colors becoming stories. She leaned closer, and as the shopkeeper watched, the girl smiled. Small at first, then fuller, as though something inside her had unlocked. Time passed quietly. The candle burned low. The shop breathed slow and steady. Outside, the day moved on, unaware of the magic unfolding within these walls. But inside, something ancient and beautiful was taking place. Another heart was finding rest. Another story had found its reader. Another traveler had been gently reminded that they were not alone. And when the girl eventually closed the book and rose from the chair, she carried something with her. Not the book itself, but what it had given. Wonder, stillness, a sense of being known. The shopkeeper opened the door. Morning light filtered in, soft and gold. The girl stepped out into the world again. And the bookshop? It remained, quiet as ever, waiting patiently, as it always had, for the next soul seeking peace. At the edge of night, the end.